He has wiped out by his grace through faith in Christ your every sin, past, present, future.
Christian hedonist is somebody who says that my greatest joy, my greatest good is God. And therefore, I will pursue that joy and I will pursue that God above all else. So God's glorified and I'm satisfied.
You are now listening to the Pastor Discussions Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 96 of the Pastor Discussions Podcast. I'm John.
You went back like a...
I did. I regressed.
It's like we're going to the past.
96.
All right, well, this is your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.
And you're Joe.
And I am Joe.
Yeah, there we go. Well, now that we completely screwed that up.
It's not screwed up. It's just different.
It's just different. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing things different.
Don't tell everyone.
So what we're going to... let's get some admin stuff out of the way up front. Number one, I have a standing desk now.
Yeah, I have one, but it's not on my desk
yet. It's not set up yet. This thing is massive. I did not realize how big it was.
I looked in your office and I saw how high. That thing goes way up. It goes way up.
It's awesome. So I had the other one in here at first, but then I started I grabbed that other one to bring it up, and I was like, that's not even going to fit on Joe's desk. So I put my big one on my desk and gave you the one that would be more appropriate to your desk size. And
I only have a laptop, so it's fine.
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Like standing, and you can move around a little bit more, and it's good. So thanks, Eric, if you're listening. We appreciate the standing desks.
I'm excited to use mine. I'll probably set it up next week.
It's pretty awesome. I'm a fan because I feel like such a pile sitting.
Yeah, it's not that I feel like a pile, but I can definitely feel it up in like that in between the shoulder blades.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting there typing, and I tend to kind of slouch over. So yeah. So I'm excited to use it.
So there's that. And then we're part of the Bar Podcast Network. You can check out other shows, which Dwayne there's some new shows in the network.
Nice.
There's some awesome stuff going on. So thebarpodcast.com and check that out. And then
I don't know if Joel's is he pushing our podcast, or we?
It doesn't matter. We like to give you guys good stuff to listen to. And Joel Suttecase is a well thought out apologist. So if you're into apologetics, even if you're not, it doesn't matter if you're into apologetics or not. Just take our word for it.
He has some great topics that are.
Yeah, I know, right? Like
apologetics. So
it's really good, and he's
had famous people too.
I know.
He's had Doug Wilson.
I know. I'm waiting
Joe
for him
Thorne's been on there.
I'm waiting for him to get John Piper on there, and then get the digits.
He might. I bet he's working his magic now.
But okay, so here's the thing about Joel. Joel is he's from Chicago.
Yeah.
And he talks so fast.
I don't think
he actually has to slow himself down for his podcast. And he reminds me of Vince Vaughn in some of those movies,
where he just,
I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, I'm sorry, but now I'm feeling sorry. It's just, he goes back and forth. It's hilarious. It's great. So I just enjoy listening to him. But
so he's got the Think podcast.
Yeah.
So
and it's actually part of, he and his wife are with Crew now.
Yep.
And doing ministry with them, doing apologetics with them. So check that out. That's worth listening to.
So we're probably always going to have a Chicago tie.
We've got a Chicago thing, man, because we lost Dave. I'm still upset about that. I'm still mourning the loss of
Resurrection.
I was legitimately sad when he called me and was like, "Hey man, we're not shipping coffee out anymore. Sorry about that." I was like, "No, come on, man." So, so we got to have something for Chicago.
See if he'll make an exception,
a special dispensation for me. No, I don't think he would. Nor would I even ask him to. But, so I think that's it.
So what coffee are you?
I don't know, man. So I did ask Dave, and I think it was Onyx Coffee is something that he recommended.
So I know Black Rifle Coffee.
Yeah.
And I've had a few of those that I really like, and then there's a few that are...
Black Rifle Coffee is like everything else in the military, which is in your face and will knock you on the ground. I like it. I really do. I mean, I like Black Rifle coffee because like you drink it and you feel like you just got punched in the face with caffeine. But the thing I liked about Dave's coffee was it was just really smooth. And there was a different taste. It was like it was really tasty. So he made a couple of recommendations that I'm gonna try out, and I'll let you know how that goes. But so I had a breakfast this morning at Chances Are with what time
did you guys do?
7?
Okay.
They're not open at 6 anymore.
Yep.
They're open at 7 now because of staffing issues. But so I had breakfast over there, and I don't know what it is about their coffee. It's not my favorite, but every time I leave there, I had like 3 cups of coffee, like little, diner cups. Every time I leave there, I feel like I've got the jitters. Yeah. It's got like, it must be jacked full of caffeine or something.
Put something special.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I haven't drank any today, but
other than
this morning. Yeah. Okay. So, now I'm just on to Mountain Dew. So I'm trying to watch the caffeine levels. So yeah. All right. So now that all that's over with and we wasted your time for 5 minutes, that you're never going to get back, but it's a free podcast and you're not paying to listen to it.
Maybe they got a few laughs.
Here you go. So. Let's talk. This is actually this is a serious topic. This is not a light topic in the sense of like something that deserves a lot of laughs and yucks, but you had brought this to me,
which my brother-in-law had kind of poked at.
So how did this come about? Like we're going to talk about Kobe Bryant, and not so much about Kobe Bryant, but about maybe some of the cultural things that his death and other famous people's deaths. Princess Diana. This goes way back.
Right. So
same thing. But
we were watching a show that was talking about. It was a game show, and it was reflecting back on Princess Diana, and it was kind of the same as I was thinking about it. It was the same reaction from the public that this Kobe Bryant thing had. So my brother-in-law and I were talking, and he's like, you guys should do a podcast on this thing because of the reaction of all like not just the media,
right? Yeah.
But even fans and people in general of him dying. And there's almost this memorializing thing. And there was even this. I had read one that he had gone to mass that morning, and so he had gone through his confessions. And
there you go.
There was some Catholic priest had come out and said, "We're glad he was there." So he's in good shape.
Amen.
So anyway, I just thought it would be, and I kind of agreed with it with Jake. I think this would be a good conversation to have. How should we view these type of things, and what does this expose about what we think of life in general? Why is there this valuing of this athlete in this case, or you got Princess Diana, this royalty person,
adopted royalty?
Yeah, why does that happen?
She married into it. It's not really royal. That's a really good question, because I think that what we tend to all right, so this I've been thinking a little bit about this, and so we do this in sports, we do this in acting. So we just had the Academy Awards, and Joaquin Phoenix won. I didn't watch the Academy Awards. I just watched the little YouTube video.
Things,
and it was like he used this reception of this award as a platform. It's becoming an increasing thing for a statement. It wasn't like an acceptance speech or a thank you like it used to be. It's like a pontification on whatever topic happens to be, as if everybody's like listening with bated breath, trying to figure out what Joaquin Phoenix thinks about X or Y or Z. And I think that the reason that happens is because people actually listen and take it to heart. And so the question then becomes like, why is that? And I think that there's something deeper than just, than just like adoring somebody or feeling a connection with somebody. I think that there's a worship issue going on, because so you see somebody that is incredibly talented or incredibly gifted in a certain area, no matter what that is, whether it's acting or philanthropy and what we tend to do is we tend to elevate that because we think, because we see that excellence in their life, that represents maybe like the best of us and the best of humanity in that specific realm. And what we don't see is that ability is a result of God's gifting and God's grace, and is meant to not terminate with the focus on the individual, but to point us to the creator who created that. And so like great pieces of artwork call to the admiration of the artist. And in the same way, that admiration of the artist should call us to the admiration of God for giving that ability. And so I think there's something deeper. I think there's something like woven into humanity that desires and longs for seeing beauty and praising the beauty that we see. And that's ultimately meant to be for God, but for unbelievers, it terminates on that person.
Well, and I think the mistake that I've seen in many cases for believers is they're doing the same thing. They're kind of following that line of thinking and following the culture into saying, well, this person was so great for society and this person was so great for this sport. Like, we have an opportunity as believers to, I think, like you said, to say, yes, he was great, but what should that really point you to? Mm-hmm. Like the giver of those gifts and the giver of that ability who gave him those things and gave him
that opportunity,
and the work ethic that he had. And we all of a sudden forget that he's created in the image of God, just like everybody else is, to reflect God. That's ultimately, he was created to worship God, just like every other human being was created. So with that in mind, how do you, I think some of it's just amazing to see how so I think this comes back ultimately to, it's an identity thing. So you were talking about, it's a worship thing. It's a living out, something that I think all of us crave to do, to be really good at something. And there's something with famous people, and parents live this out through their kids.
We're worshipers. We're praisers.
Right. And you even I think they live this out through their kids in many instances, that when they're playing sports, is like they're living out their
fantasy of what it would be like to be that great,
and that what they wanted. Like, because some of our kids are more gifted. I think my kids are going to be more gifted athletically, at least two of them, probably not one, than I was. Yeah. And so instead of seeing that God's given them a special gift, I think what people start to do, and the reason you get this reaction, is there's this envious identity issue with them wanting what that person had. Yeah. And I think we do a disservice, and this was kind of leads to the other issue I had with it, is like, we put more value on that person's life than we do on other people's lives. Like, how many tragedies happen every day? Because I heard a lot about this is such a great travesty, and it was, and it's sad. And these families have been, I mean, they're going to mourn. They've been broken. Yeah, and it is, but yet all the focus goes and onto this one person. Yeah, who, and this family has been broken too. Yeah, but it's like, what we're doing is we're implying that this life is more valuable than these other lives. And that's where I think I'm seeing something that believers should step into and speak out against.
I think that as you were saying some of that stuff, and as I was thinking about this a little bit more, I think this ties into both why we quote unquote idolize people that are good at things and how we respond to things like this. But I think that Christians, by and large, have lost the art of thinking through things theologically outside of Sunday morning. Like, you'll come in, you sit down, you sing, you hear a sermon, maybe even read the Bible throughout the week, whatever it is, but you've got your Christianity section of your life where it's like, okay, I'm reading the Bible, I'm doing my Christian thing, I'm going to think through theologically here. But what we don't do a good job of is applying that theology in our lives and in thinking through and interpreting the world around us. And so if I'm rightly applying theology, there's a few things that are going to happen. Number one, I'm going to be gripped by the tragedy of death. But not just for one person.
Right.
For all of them. And every time we hear, I think we get so desensitized to it too, because we hear these stories all the time.
And the thing that I think got in my craw about this is because people die all the time and we don't give it two thoughts.
Yeah.
Somebody famous dies.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's like this feeling of, oh, the world just lost something.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that person hasn't had maybe a broader impact on culture, but do we really think through an image bearer of God has just died?
Mm-hmm.
That is Kobe Bryant. And how about like whoever, like how many people die in car accidents every day?
Who even knows the name of the pilot of the plane or of the helicopter that was on?
It's a really hard name to,
like that's everybody is talking about one of the 7 people that died.
Right.
And to your point, that's what everybody lands on.
And so, but I think it exposes that we don't take death very seriously.
Yeah.
Until it has an actual, what we feel is an impact on us.
Yeah.
It's like, should believers really be that, have that kind of an attitude about death instead of, doesn't it just show a lack of urgency to share the gospel and to understand where people who die, who don't have faith in Christ are going?
And that sort of ties back to,
like, that's just sad.
It is. And that ties back to thinking through and interpreting life theologically through a biblical worldview, as Jeff would say. Like I was like, he would always say that. It was like, you got to think through things from a biblical worldview. Like, what are you talking about, man? What do you mean by that? And as I got to know him and as I talked to him more, it's interpreting and viewing life, all of life, through the light of Scripture and the truth of God's word. And that's the lens, that's the filter that everything comes through, so that we are rightly discerning the world around us. So you've got all sorts of things in play here. You've got image bearers of God that have died. You've got the sting of death that reminds us of the fall and reminds us of the sinfulness of humanity. You've got 7 people in this case who's
9 total.
9 total. See, I don't even read the news. 9 people total who their eternity is set.
Right.
There is no more option for them.
Like, okay, just think about the gravity of that. Where is your sense of urgency then?
And that's where that interpretation of the world through a biblical lens leads us to living differently. Because if we look through, okay, how should I think through this? Okay, there's image bearers of God that have died. There's death that's reminding us of sin. There's people whose eternity is fixed and set. There's a culture around that's idolizing this one person and not thinking or caring about these other people whose families are equally hurting and are equally broken. And there's the media that's going through, and this is now taking over the news when there are other tragic deaths of quote unquote less important people that don't get any. And I'm not saying that they're capable of even broadcasting everybody that passes away or anything like that. I'm not advocating for that, but I'm just saying that there seems to be this, you'll get a 30-second blip about somebody that gets shot in an alley, and then you get a 3-minute tribute to the greatness of Kobe Bryant. He was great on the basketball court, from what I understand. I'm not a big basketball fan, but I mean, God gave him a unique gift. Right. And so then how do I think about that? How do I work through? And so all of this comes through and filters through this biblical lens. And then you're left with the question of, how should I live and how should I think and how should I act in light of that? And the most basic foundational truth that I think we arrive at is, we don't know how long anybody has on this earth. Everyone's days are numbered, and God has placed us in the lives of the people that we know as Christians for a reason. So how are we going to steward the time that we do have? How are we going to steward the time we have with our families? And how are we going to uphold the value of all human life in our relationships as we live here in York, in our case.
Well, and I think this gives us a great opportunity as believers to engage with unbelievers on a topic that should lead you right into a gospel conversation. So you've got, even so a non-basketball fan knows who Kobe Bryant is.
Yes.
Like he was a great athlete and he did transcend a sport, right? So most people, whether they're fans of basketball or sports in general or not, are going to know about him, are going to know about death. So you're going to have opportunity after opportunity to do two things in conversations with people. Either be like, yeah, what a tragedy. It's sad. Remember, kind of have that tribute mentality, or talk about, that is really sad and that is really hard. But why do you think it is sad? Why is it so hard for people?
Yeah.
Why are there people lining up outside of the Staples Center where they play? Thousands of people just hanging out. Why are there news channel after news channel, sports channel after sports channel, throwing up all these tributes? Why are there conversations in every part of the country and probably in places throughout the world too? Because basketball is big in China and other places like that are having conversations about this. Do we look at those situations and say, yeah, let's just kind of go with the culture? Like, this is an opportunity for believers to talk into some of those things you talked about with, what does sin remind us of? What does sin point us, or what does death remind us of? And what does death point us to? It points us to, like you're saying, the sin of man. The reason we die is because of sin. And sin needs a redeemer to come in, and sinners need a redeemer to come in and to redeem them from their sin. Like, this is an opportunity for a gospel conversation.
Death has been conquered. It's been swallowed up by Christ. You even something as simple as that is such a tragedy. I hope he knew Jesus personally.
Exactly.
Oh, well, yeah, he did. He went to mass. Oh, really? Well, there's a difference between going to mass and knowing Christ personally. Right. Like all sorts of habits. Like, I'm thankful that I can have confidence and not fear death. This makes you think about death. Are you ever afraid of dying? Like, there's so many different ways that you can go with this that have redemptive value to it. And so I think that there is a way. I think we should talk about it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, also use those other people that died in this tragic accident, not just focus on one. Like, there might be one that's known, but even just a simple, like, I bet you those other families are really struggling right now, and really broken, and that we should remember to pray for them as we pray for Kobe's family.
Yeah.
Like, there's all sorts of redemptive conversations that can happen. It's
super interesting. So we're doing this Sunday school class right now on spiritual gifting, and so we're teaching on equality of gifts this week. And I think it's such a great parallel to, there's equality of life, right? Image bearers of God are image bearers of God. And while some God's given different gifts, and maybe those gifts have been elevated by our culture and said, hey, this is a better gift than maybe this person over here. In some ways, by the way we react, we're buying into that same thing. And I think we do that same thing. That has bled into the church, right? Because we've got pastors are up at the top, and then elders are normally underneath, or associate pastors, or however deacons, we kind of tend to think of things that way. And you've got people who have these more type A gifts, and you've got people that have these type B gifts. Well, we see all the type A gifts, therefore those are the better gifts. Yeah. Those are the more mature people. And so I think that same mindset that is driven by the culture has bled into the church. And I think just as I've looked at the curriculum for this week, like, there's no distinction between, we're in 1 Corinthians 12, so you got no distinction between the foot and the mouth, even though the mouth does all the talking, everybody hears the mouth. Yeah.
And they serve different purposes, they serve different functions, but they're equally important.
And so I think that applies to human beings too. And just because the media, which drives a lot of our culture here in America, elevates certain things and then gives these other people like footnotes, like we need to see past that, that veil and that mask and that way that they're putting things out there, and see and point to the value of life in general, and not look at this one person or this other person who are famous and who our culture says these people are important. Yeah. And look at all the other people as not as important.
I think this also says something about that I think is very interesting about the nature of human beings. And that is, we all long for greatness. Yeah. We all long to behold greatness. We all long to see beauty and talk about beauty. I mean, there's beauty in watching a great basketball player play. There's beauty in watching a great ballet. There's beauty in watching a great artist. I mean, Bob Ross is one of my favorite things to watch when I want to take a nap. And I struggle with it because he's so relaxing and soothing. He's, I'll just beat the devil out of it, but at the same time, I'm like transfixed. And I'm like, I can't sleep because I want to see how this turns out. And he does these things where he'll be on there and he'll be doing something. You're like, what? No, what is that? And then all of a sudden it just appears. Right. And it's like, we want to see beauty. We want to see greatness. We long for it. We're wired for it. And the greatness of human beings and the greatest achievements of human beings and the most beauty that we see, or the greatest beauty that we see put on by human beings, is a mere shadow of the greatness and beauty of God in Christ and what he has done for us. And so we should celebrate these things that are great, and they are great. I mean, there is beauty. We should celebrate the beauty of this earth, but we need to use it to point people to a superior beauty and a superior greatness in God.
Yeah. Well, I hear people say all the time, they'll put some earphones in or something and to go to sleep. Yeah. It's like, I don't understand how you can do that. Like there's beauty to the way that artists put music together and the words that they use. And like, I'm captivated by that. So I can't fall asleep to that. But, there was one other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is like, you're not elevated before God for doing great things that the world sees here on earth. So just because there is beauty in making music or writing poetry or painting pictures or playing sports or giving eloquent speeches, like those all those things, we can be moved by those things and they're beautiful. But just because maybe you're one of those people who God's given some gifting in the way that he's created you, and ability to do that and to do it really well, that doesn't give you more footing before God. Like Kobe Bryant is not in a better position before God than the other 8 people that were in that helicopter with him.
There's a aspect of platform to this. Like Kobe Bryant just had a bigger platform. Right. I'm sure that there are people that are incredibly gifted at basketball that never get that opportunity, that never get that platform. I heard somebody asked Paul Washer once who the greatest preacher alive was. They were talking about Spurgeon or something, and they're like, "Who's the greatest preacher today?" And he says, "You don't know him. I don't know him. He lives in obscurity in some, third world country preaching the gospel day in and day out." And then you go to things like, I just came back from the Bethlehem conference, and you see some of the greatest preachers in the world gathered there, and you get to sit under that, and there's beauty to that, and we should appreciate that, but it doesn't minimize the beauty of the small church pastor that's preaching his heart out every Sunday to the glory of God, or the person that's, they're in, when we were living in Missouri, there was this group of ladies, and man, they were just the cleanup crew. Yeah. I mean, and they loved it. They never complained. They had a smile on their face, and they would talk. And there were times I'd walk past the kitchen, and everybody else would be off doing their thing and hanging out and having conversations and everything. And these 3 or 4 ladies would be in there, and it was beautiful watching them serve in that way. I mean, there's beauty in motherhood. There's beauty in things that are not recognized and not seen that happen behind the scenes. There's beauty in a mom getting up every night, every 2 hours to care for her child and love her child and feed her child and sacrifice sleep for the sake of another person. There's beauty all over the place. And so some have a different platform, but none of that, neither the mother nor the lady serving in the kitchen, nor the preacher, nor the basketball player or anything else earns any merit before God. They're either acts of self-exaltation or acts of worship in the mom getting up. It's either I'm doing this for my benefit so that this kid will take care of me when I'm old, or because I have to, or this is an opportunity to serve God by ministering to my child's needs. And I would argue that the beauty of worship surpasses the beauty of skill. There are those that are gifted and have talents that use them to exalt self. And while there's beauty in the talent being exercised in maybe the way that they play, that beauty is stained by the self-focus. And then there's beauty, and I can't remember his name. He's a football player, he's a quarterback. Every interview I've seen with him, he's pointing to how football is not his life. He's thankful for the opportunity to play football. But God
Sounds
is the
like
one.
Russell Wilson.
I think that's it. Gave him the ability, and he wants to live to the glory of God, and he just uses his platform to exalt Christ. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, whatever your platform is, whether it's a large platform or a small platform, do what you can and do it the best you can. Do it in a way that exudes beauty and talent that God has given you, but do it as a means of exalting the beauty of Christ.
And I think that's really good. I think another thing, as we kind of wrap this up, how do you look at those who are elevated and they have broader platforms versus those who don't as a believer? So like if you're a believer and hopefully you're committed to a local church, is it going to mean more if the preacher dies than a fellow member to you? Is it going to be more of a travesty that person dies? Now, it might leave maybe a different void.
Yeah.
But there's still going to be a void when you remove a part of the body.
Yeah.
Whether it's the mouth or it's the hand. So,
and it's
like, how do we look at those things? Because I think we do look at those things different. Now, obviously, you're going to have a different level of pain if it's a friend versus maybe just an acquaintance. But if they're kind of on the same level, and let's say, knock on wood here, that the preaching pastor dies.
And not the worship pastor.
Versus a member, and you've kind of got the same maybe friendships with both of those, which one's going to be more impactful? Which one's going to be the one that, and if we have to say, well, it's the preaching pastor, and the reason is why, it's because they have more impact. I think we've completely missed the beauty of how God's created us and how he's created human beings in general with this complementary gift sets that he gives all of humanity to flourish. Yeah. And what we're saying is that this one's more valuable than this one, and this one did more than this one did. And that's a very skewed way of looking at it, and it's the wrong way to look at it. And so I think we need to be careful and this kind of thing, when this happens, should remind us that of kind of those things that you talked about, but it should also remind us that everyone's going to stand before God. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to give an account for what they did and what they believed or they didn't believe. Yeah. Every single person, and every life should matter to us because every life is bearing the image of the created God. So are we participating in this elevation and in this celebrity culture that we live in? Or are we using that to combat that? And is that giving us, is that spurring in us an urgency to share the gospel with people?
I wonder how much like jealousy of different platforms, different gifts plays into that. So there was when we were at the Bethlehem conference, J.D. Greer was talking about missions in light of the second coming, and he was talking about how his church has sent out like 1,200 people. And at the Q&A, because I mean the Summit Church is a huge church. At the Q&A, one of the things that came up was I'm feeling a little bit discouraged because I'm a small church and I can't raise up anybody. You're sitting there talking about 10,000 people or 1,200 people or whatever it was. And Piper said something really profound. He said, "Don't despise this church's gifts. Don't despise the way God has gifted this church. Don't despise the way that God has gifted this man because he's gifted you differently."
Yeah.
And so I think if we spent more time celebrating the gifts that God has given others as a means of celebrating God and worshiping God,
that's the connecting point.
That's the connecting point that matters, because it's not just our own. And I'm talking about in the Christian context here as we're paralleling this to other things. There shouldn't be a celebrity pastor. There should be a pastor that's appreciated for the gifts that God has given him and the way he uses them to glorify God.
And we should be celebrating.
And that
those.
should be impactful.
Yeah.
And we should feel the loss of that, but we should also feel the loss of the lady who uses her gifts, or the man that uses his gifts to greet every Sunday and has a smile on their face. And when they pass away, we feel that loss there too, because we celebrated their gifts being used to the glory of God. So I think that's sort of like, for me, that's a good ending place for where I land on it. As we think about that parallel, and it should just spur us to use the gifts to show the beauty of God and the beauty of the way he's created the church and the way that he's created us in creating, in playing, in doing everything to the glory of God.
It is amazing. The parallels, as we were talking about this, the parallels between how God created the church versus how he created the world.
Yeah.
Like we should be showing the world how it's supposed to function.
They should be taking cues from us, not the other way around.
Right. As we function at the church. So like, I think it was just a good challenge to think through. Do we think
good topic, Jake,
about, do we think about death the way that we should?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you talked about the biblical worldview, because that's ultimately what it does come down to. It's like, are you viewing this through the lens of a believer, or do you view it through the lens of an unbeliever, unless you're in church on Sunday morning? So
do you get influenced more by what the culture says you should think and how the culture says you should think through it, or by saturating yourself with God's word and how he says we should think through it? So good topic, man. So we're doing this on Friday, and we're not last minuting this one. So, we'll be, if you want to hear, if you got a topic or an idea for a show, hit us up, pastordiscussions@gmail.com. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And,
I'd love to hear people's comments on this.
Yeah.
Because I think this is
something that touches all of us.
Yeah.
This isn't something that's like, it doesn't really apply to me. Like, cause I mean, if it's not Kobe Bryant, it's somebody else.
Right. Exactly. You know? I've seen this in some form or another.
Yeah.
So if you got some disagreements or just some comments, something to add on, we'd love to hear it. So reach out.
Read them.
Yeah.
On air. Or record them.
Right.
And then play them
on air.
So,
if you
listen, if you hit play, it's all up to you. All right. So we'll be back next week.
All right. So join us then for the next episode of the Pastor Discussions podcast, your weekly conversation on doctrine and faith and the Christian life.